Rita's life. Thomas was a young college student. He came from a small town and had worked very hard to gain entry into one of the America's best colleges. He was a fearless person and helped save Rita's life. One day, he was returning from the library after doing some research for his college assignment. The sun had set and the parking lot was almost dark. As he hurried to his hostel, he heard a woman screaming. He turned towards the sound and saw two men attacking a female student named Rita. He ran to save her. When the assailants saw him coming, they tried to escape with a purse. Thomas ran after them. One of them slashed his face with a knife, but Thomas did not stop. He was able to catch the assailant, who had Rita's purse. Thanks to his efforts, the other assailant was also caught soon. The old man saves the village. Once, there was an old man who lived in a village in Japan with his wife. When his wife died, he stopped talking to everyone and moved to a mountain nearby. The villagers would often come to check on him. One day, an earthquake hit their village. There were mild tremors and the villagers were not very worried. However, the old man saw from his house in the mountain that the earthquake had caused a massive tsunami. He could see the waves building up before they hit the village. He knew that no matter how fast he ran, the tsunami would reach before him. Suddenly, he had an idea. He set his house on fire. He knew the villagers would come to rescue him when they saw the smoke and flame. As he had expected, many of the villagers came running to save him and were, in turn, saved from the tsunami. Lewis saves farm's animals from fire. Lewis was a young farmer. One night, he woke up when he felt thirsty. He got up to drink some water. While he was drinking, he heard some strange noises. He went outside to see where the noises were coming from. He saw that a building on the other side of his land had caught fire. Lewis ran to see if anyone was caught in the fire. When he reached the building, he realized it was a farm. The noise was coming from the animals who were stuck inside the farm, as the door was locked from outside. Lewis quickly found a sturdy rod to break the lock. He then opened the door and let the animals out. Some of the smaller animals were disoriented because of the smoke. Lewis went inside the burning farm to bring them out. Thanks to his efforts, none of the animals died in the fire. Makalo saves the village. Makalo was an 8-year-old boy. He used to live with his grandfather in the village. The stories his grandfather told him filled him with courage and bravery. He wondered if he would ever get a chance to show his bravery. One day, when he was going to his friend's house, he heard a strange noise coming from behind the trees. He stopped immediately. When he looked closely, he saw a leopard hiding behind the tree. The trees were right next to the road. Makalo knew that the leopard could easily kill anyone walking on the road. He turned around and ran to the village, shouting at the top of his voice to attract everyone's attention. He did not worry about whether the leopard was following him or not. He warned everyone to stay inside, while the village elders informed the authorities. Thanks to Makalo, everyone was saved. Aziz prevents a train accident. Aziz was 14 years old boy. He used to live with his widowed mother. After attending school, he would work for a few hours at a small grocery shop near the railway station. One day, when he was on his way to work, he noticed that a piece of the track had been removed by some miscreants. Aziz knew that this was very dangerous. He ran to the station to inform the station master. However, before he could reach the station, he heard a train coming down the tracks. If the train did not stop, it would be derailed and many passengers would die. Aziz decided to stop the train himself. He turned and ran towards the train. He took off his shirt and waved it like a flag. When the injured driver saw him on the tracks, he pulled the brakes immediately. Thanks to Aziz, all the passengers were unharmed. Manuel stands up for children. Manuel was an old man. He lived in Brazil. He used to sell food from a van every day to earn money. He used to park his van near Children Park, opposite the busy bus stand. Every day, children of all ages would come to play in the afternoon. One day, Manuel saw some thugs near the park. He was dismayed to see the goons not allowing the children to enter the park. They wanted to take control of the park so that they might use it for illegal activities. The children were scared and decided to leave. Manuel told the thugs to leave because the park was for the children. The thugs threatened to hurt him, but Manuel was insistent. Even when they attacked his van, he did not back down. Ultimately, the thugs had to leave since they did not want the police to come. Amelia saves her grandfather. Amelia was a 7-year-old girl who loved to go for walks with his grandfather. She especially enjoyed the season of cherry blossoms when all the trees in her town were filled with beautiful flowers. One day, Amelia and her grandfather were so carried away by the beauty of the cherry blossoms that they went farther than usual. Amelia was not worried. since she was with her grandfather. Unfortunately, her grandfather had a sudden heart attack. He sat down on a bench to catch his breath, but before he could say or do anything, he fainted. The sun had begun to set, and Amelia did not know the way home, but she behaved very bravely. She ran on the path until she found an adult. Amelia told the young man what had happened with the grandfather and asked him to help. Finally, the grandfather was saved and everyone praised Amelia. Janet survives a blizzard. Janet was a very adventurous and active girl. She loved to go hiking with her friends. One day, she decided to go on a hiking by herself. She was able to cover a large distance and set up a camp in a quiet and isolated area. While she was sleeping, the mountain was hit by a freak blizzard. When she woke up in the morning, her tent was surrounded by snow. Janet did not know what to do, but she did not lose heart. She took her essential belongings and decided to hike up the mountain until she found a clearing. She knew that the rangers would be looking for any survivors. After 14 hours, a helicopter spotted her and she was rescued. Janet's toes were damaged due to frostbite, but she did not lose her love for hiking. She returned the next year and completed her solo hike. Defoe's bravery saves his friends. Defoe was a young boy who was studying in school. Unfortunately, his village was in an area full of conflict. Every day there were skirmishes between the rebel army and the government. One day, when the boys were studying, the rebels attacked their school. They locked the teachers in one room and started threatening the students. Defoe knew that he would be caught and forced to join the rebels if he tried to run away. He hid behind a desk and waited for the correct timing. When the rebel went to the other class, he sneaked with his friends into a storeroom and locked it from outside. Then he ran into the staff room and hid in a cupboard under a pile of papers. The rebels left after a few minutes, taking as many boys as they could. They did not check the storeroom because it was locked from outside. Gabriel rescues two children. Gabriel was a teenager who liked to spend his free time by the riverside. He knew how to swim very well, but he also knew that one must always be careful while swimming. One day, he and his friends were playing near the river. "It is so hot. Let us go swimming," said a friend. "No," replied Gabriel. "This is not the right time for swimming. There are black clouds upstream, which means the river might suddenly swell up with rainwater." Suddenly, they heard the roar of water and saw water gushing rapidly into the river. To their horror, they saw that two children had been swept into the river by the sudden onslaught of water. Gabriel did not pause to think. He jumped into the river and swam towards the children. It was very difficult to swim against the ferocious river, but he was able to rescue them. Irina speaks up for an autistic man. Irina was a secretarial assistant in Moscow. Every day, she would take the metro to reach her office. One day, she was running a little late and missed her train. While she was waiting on the platform, she saw a group of rowdy teenagers in a corner who were creating a ruckus. At first, Irina ignored them, but then she heard some whimpering sounds coming from the group. She went to see what was happening. She was horrified to see that the boys were teasing an autistic man. They had taken his bag and were not returning it. The man needed his bag as it had his money and other documents. Many people were looking at the teenagers with disgust, but they were afraid to speak up since they could see the group had guns. However, Irina did not feel scared. She forced the teenagers to stop teasing the man and return his bag. Cheng saves a panda. Cheng was a student of zoology. It was his dream to work in the panda reserve. He liked to spend his free time observing pandas in their natural habitat. One day, when he was in the jungle, he heard a panda's cry for help. He moved slowly in that direction. A short distance away, he saw the panda. It was choking on something and was unable to make any noise now. Cheng knew that the panda might die if he went to seek others' help. However, if he went too close, the panda could attack and injure him. But there was no other option. By then, the panda was nearly unconscious. Cheng quickly opened its mouth. He saw that the panda was choking on a plastic wrapper that some tourist had carelessly thrown away. Cheng removed the wrapper with the help of forceps and managed to save the panda's life. Jhumki fights for ecology. Jhumki was a young girl who lived alone with her mother in their village in the Pichakio, Western Ghats. Her father and brothers used to work in the city, while Jhumki and her mother farmed a small piece of land. One day, some men came from the city and told them that they would have to vacate their land. They said that they had bought the entire village as it was situated over a very large deposit of some mineral. Jhumki was aghast that the men intended to uproot the entire village and destroy the forest to dig up the minerals. At first, the villagers were dispirited, but when they heard Jhumki's fervent speech, they decided to fight for the land. They formed a human chain as a mark of protest. They refused to leave the land and declared the sale illegal, since none of the villagers had received any money or agreed to the sale of their ancient land. Courageous Bilal saves fellow boys. Bilal lived in Syria in an orphanage along with many other boys. One day, the orphanage was attacked by the Syrian enemy. The owner of the orphanage felt it was dangerous to keep the children there. So he decided to smuggle the boys to a safer city by hiding them among the vegetables he used to sell. On his way, he was stopped at a checkpoint set up by the enemy. He told the guards that he was going to the city to sell some vegetables. One of the guards was suspicious and decided to check the bags. He hid the bag in which Bilal was, but Bilal did not make any sound. When they were at a safe distance, the owner rushed to check on Bilal. He found Bilal badly hurt, but the boy did not make a sound, as it would have sent them into danger. Thus, his action saved the lives of his fellow boys. Julia prevents a camping disaster. Julia and her friends were going camping for the first time from the school. They were very excited about it. The children had to hike for a few kilometers before they would reach the campsite. Julia and her friends were very excited by the beautiful birds and plants that they saw on the way. They began to dawdle, and before they knew it, the group had moved on. Nightfall found them all alone in the forest. Julia knew that they would have to wait till morning. She also knew that there were many dangerous animals in the forest. She quickly gathered some wood and lit a fire so that they might feel safe. She made sure that the fire burned all night so that no animals might attack them. The smoke also helped attract the attention of the teachers, who rescued them early in the morning. Shreyan doesn't give up. When Shreyan was born, his hands were not formed properly. On the left arm, he had only 2 fingers, whereas his right arm ended with a stump. Many people pitied Shreyan because of his disformed arms. But Shreyan was very brave. He refused to see this as a problem and saw it as an opportunity to set an example of how everyone can lead a fulfilled life. Shreyan loved statues and wanted to become a sculptor. His teachers felt his desire would never be fulfilled because of his arms. However, Shreyan never gave up. He tried to see how he could bring his ideas to life. Even when people ridiculed him, he continued practicing. His parents encouraged and supported him. With time, Shreyan became skilled at sculpting clay. When he was 27 years old, Shreyan held an exhibition of his sculptures. People were amazed to see how beautiful his sculptures were. Alana overcomes her fear. Alana lived with her parents in Brazil. When she was very young, she had seen a horrific road accident. Since that day, she was afraid of blood. One day, she was traveling with her mother in their car. A truck was coming from the other side. One of the tires of the truck burst, and the driver lost control of his vehicle. Alana's mother tried to swerve and prevent an accident, but unfortunately, they collided with the truck. Alana was not hurt, but her mother's left arm was broken and she was covered with small bleeding cuts. Alana's mother was very frightened, but Alana knew that she had to help her mother. She took out the first aid kit, bandaged her mother's arm, and cleaned her wounds. After that, Alana helped her mother tend to the driver of the truck who was bleeding heavily from the gash on his head. Al saves mom and baby from fire. Al was a young Nigerian man. He liked to go for a walk every evening after dinner. One night, he heard commotion on the street ahead of him. He could see that there was a fire raging in a building. When he reached the building, he saw a young lady had collapsed near the balcony door. She had hurt her leg and could not walk. She had her baby in her arms. Al knew that by the time the fire engine would come through the narrow lanes, it would be too late. He ran into the building and climbed the stairs. There was smoke everywhere, and it was difficult for him to see anything. He followed the noise of the baby crying until he reached the lady. He pulled her onto his back and carried her baby in his arms and brought both of them out of safely. Nicholas and his friends freed the gypsies. Nicholas and his friends used to travel around the country during their holidays. They used to go from village to village and work for their lodging. This way, they could save money and help people as well. One day, they reached a gypsy settlement outside a village. They found many women and children living in caravans. The women told them that the police had locked the men since they did not have any travel permit. Nicholas knew that no travel permit was needed for traveling from one city to another. He knew that the police did this to harass them. Nicholas and his friends confronted the police. They told them to release the prisoners, otherwise they would lodge a complaint against them in the next village. The police threatened to arrest them all but Nicholas and his friends were fearless. Ultimately, the police had to let the gypsies go. Boris helps a child to safety. In 1990s, the former Yugoslavia was wrecked by civil war. Boris was fighting the war along with his people. He spent many years in the trenches outside the enemy villages. One day, while patrolling, he saw a small boy hiding behind a tree. At first, he thought that he might be a spy. A closer look revealed him as 8 years old boy. The boy belonged to the village that Boris was fighting against. He has wandered off, and now he was lost. He did not know how to return to his village. Boris decided to take him to the village border himself. He knew that he could be shot, but he did not want to put the young boy's life in danger. On the way back, Boris was shot twice by the villagers. But he waited for the shooting to stop before he sent the boy back into the village. Keshia speaks the truth. Keshia studied in the 9th grade in her school. She was a very popular girl and a good student. One day, the teacher was late. The children began playing with the ball in the class. This was against the rules. The children did not notice that the teacher was coming. When the teacher entered the class, everyone rushed back to his seat, and Alex was left holding the ball. The teacher was very angry at this behavior. The students began blaming Alex, saying he had brought the ball and was trying to show them some tricks. The teacher decided to punish Alex for playing in the class. Most students remained quiet, but Keshia told the teacher that it was not Alex alone who was to blame. All of them had been playing. The teacher was angry with the whole class, but appreciated Keshia's courage in clearing Alex's name. Kiara keeps her promise. Mrs. McAdams lived all alone in a little house on a small country lane. Ever since her husband died, her only visitor was a young girl called Kiara. Kiara would come every week to visit Mrs. McAdams and help her complete tasks around the house. Mrs. McAdams enjoyed her company a lot. Mrs. McAdams used to get very lonely on Christmas, so Kiara promised to visit her every year on Christmas. One year, there was heavy rainfall on Christmas Eve. Mrs. McAdams could not see the road from her house. She knew Kiara would not be able to come and was very sad. However, Kiara was adamant on visiting Mrs. McAdams. When her car could go no further, she decided to walk in the snow all the way to Mrs. Adams' house. It was very cold and dangerous to go by herself, but Kiara did not want to break her promise. Carmen builds a bridge. In South America, there are many villages that are cut off from the rest of the world because they lack proper bridges. One day, Carmen saw a documentary on TV about a village where there was no bridge. The villagers had to put themselves across a rope. Carmen decided to help the villagers. She started a campaign to raise money for building a bridge in order to connect the village to the rest of the world. A large amount of money was required, and many felt that it would be very difficult. However, Carmen had set her heart on achieving her goal, and she did not give up in the face of insurmountable odds. She went far and wide for public support to raise the money. Once she had raised the money, Carmen and her friends went to the village themselves and ensured that the bridge was built in their presence. Father Liam saves a murder suspect. Father Liam was the head of a church in Ireland. He was very popular and helpful. Everyone in the village respected him. One day, a man, Adrian, entered the church. Father Liam had seen his face on the news and knew he was wanted for murder. Adrian swore he was innocent and asked for sanctuary. According to church rules, any man who asked for sanctuary would be safe in the church. When the police came, Father Liam refused to turn over Adrian to them. Adrian wanted another investigation to be done, as some important evidence had been overlooked. Till the police did not agree, Father Liam kept Adrian safe, even though the whole village turned against him for harboring a murderer. However, Father Liam knew that the real courage lay in doing what was right and not giving in to public opinion. The second investigation proved Adrian innocent. Madison follows her heart. Madison belonged to a rich family. She was brought up in wealth and never wanted for anything. As she grew older, she began to develop genuine sympathy for others' suffering and trials. When Madison became an adult, she decided to donate all her money to a charity and live among the poor and work for them. This was not an easy decision. Madison knew she would have to face many difficulties. She knew that by giving away all her money, she would lose many pleasures of life. Many people tried to dissuade her. However, Madison had made up her mind. She had the courage to follow her heart, even though it led her onto a hard and difficult path. Despite all the problems she faced later on in life, Madison never regretted her decision. She felt the blessings of the poor were worth more than all the money in the world. Adeline helps her friend. Many years ago, Europe was ravaged by the Second World War. The Jews faced a lot of persecution and were targeted for their religious identity. Anyone who tried to help them was punished along with them. However, despite this, there were many people who came forward to help their Jewish friends. Adeline was one of them. She belonged to a religious Christian family. One of her best friends was Esther, a Jew. Esther and her family knew that they would soon be sent to prison and were looking for someone to help them. When Adeline came to know about it, she offered to hide them in her house. It was not an easy decision. If anyone found out, Adeline and her family would be sent to prison too. Adeline hid Esther and kept her aged parents in the attic and kept them safe from the Nazi militia. Savannah Saves Hannah. Savannah lived in the state of Louisiana in the USA in the 1880s. At that time, slavery was still legal in America. Savannah worked as a slave for a girl named Hannah. She had taken care of Hannah since she was born. Savannah loved her a lot. Hannah also treated her with great respect. She offered to give Savannah her freedom. But Savannah refused because she wanted to stay and take care of Hannah. After the Civil War had ended, the slaves of America were declared free. Many of the freed slaves were looking to take revenge from their former masters, who had treated them cruelly. One day, some freed slaves attacked Hannah's house. Hannah was very scared. Savannah hid her under a bed and told the slaves that there was no white person in the house against whom they could take revenge. She spoke so truthfully that the slaves believed her and left. Benjamin sacrifices his life for his nation. Benjamin was a young man. He was a patriot who loved his country. He joined the Air Force at the age of 25. After his training, he was assigned to a post near the frontier. Many people avoided such postings because there were always some tension at the border. But Benjamin was very happy and did his job wholeheartedly. One day, when he was doing a routine flight sortie, he noticed some suspicious movement across the border. Benjamin flew his plane as close to the site as possible. He saw that the opposing army was preparing for an attack. He knew that he should report this immediately. But before he could do anything, his plane was attacked. When the plane caught fire, Benjamin decided not to eject and save his life. Instead, he guided his plane towards the army. When his plane crashed, all their weapons were blown to pieces. Rachel saves the village. Rachel lived in a small village in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is a low-lying country. To prevent flooding, dikes have been created in many villages. This prevents water from entering the village when the water level rises. One day, Rachel decided to get some pretty flowers for her mother. When she was collecting the flowers, she saw a trickle of water flowing through a small hole in the dike. This was very dangerous, as the water could make the hole larger. Rachel knew that the adults had to be informed, but she was afraid that by the time she informed someone, the leak would grow bigger. She put her finger in the hole to plug the leak. The water stopped flowing immediately. Rachel stood with her finger in the ice-cold water for 5 hours until her mother found her and immediately informed the police. Ander saves the baby. Ander was 15 years old. He was one of the best students of his district. Every day, he would walk 3 kilometers to reach his school. One day, he was on his way to school when he heard a man shouting. Ander turned around and saw a horse running on the road. It seemed to be scared. Behind it was a cart that was swaying dangerously from side to side. The owner of the horse was running behind. As the horse passed Ander, he realized there was a young boy sitting alone in the cart. The boy was crying very loudly. Ander could see that the boy was very scared. In a trice, Ander jumped towards the horse and grabbed its reins. He pulled the reins with all his might. The horse reared up, but Ander did not let go. He was able to subdue the horse and save the child. Anya helped Azuri. Anya and Azuri studied in the same class. They were good friends. Azuri had been a victim of polio when she was very young. Due to this, her legs were slightly deformed. However, Azuri did not let herself feel physically challenged. One day, the school organized a marathon to raise money for charity. All the children in school were participating. The student would donate the money to the underprivileged children. Azuri too wanted to help raise money and decided to participate in the marathon. Anya supported her decision and promised to help. Azuri could not run very fast. Most of the children had finished the race when she was near the halfway mark. Anya was near the finish line when she noticed Azuri lagging behind. She came back to help her friend and ran with her. She encouraged her till Azuri finally crossed the finish line. Edmundo saves his father's life. Edmundo lived with his parents in an upscale area of Sao Paulo. Every year, they used to go to the hills and stay in a secluded cottage. There were no shops or neighbors nearby. Edmundo and his family enjoyed their stay there. One day, they heard an announcement on the radio that a severe storm was expected. Edmundo's father went outside to check whether there was some danger to the house. Unfortunately, he slipped and fell. He hurt himself badly. Edmundo's mother could see that a doctor was needed immediately, but the nearest doctor lived an hour away. Edmundo's father was in great pain and needed medical attention. Edmundo volunteered to bring the doctor. He went out in the raging storm and hiked over the hills until he reached the doctor. By then, the storm had abated and the doctor came back with him. Thanks to Edmundo, his father was saved. Zola fights for her country. Zola lived in South Africa many years ago. At that time, South Africa was under the regime of apartheid. Under this, every person was given a position on the basis of the color of his skin. The white minority lived in great comfort. they had access to whatever they wanted. The blacks, on the other hand, were forced to live in small and cramped quarters. They had access to limited education and had to perform menial jobs. They were not allowed many facilities simply because their skins were black. Many people revolted against this system. The government jailed all those who opposed apartheid. Those who escaped detention went into hiding. They needed help in contacting one another. Zola was only 11 years old girl at that time, but she volunteered to help carry messages from one leader to another. In this way, she helped to keep the movement alive. Adnan fights for women's rights. Adnan was a courier delivery boy and often had to travel at awkward times. One night, when he was returning from a delivery, he saw a girl waiting at the bus stop alone. As he stood at the red light, he realized that a group of teenager boys were harassing the girl by making lewd remarks. Adnan parked his van on the side of the road and went to scold the teenagers. The teenagers did not pay any attention to him and rudely told him to leave. They even threatened to beat him up if he did not leave immediately. Adnan was not scared by these threats. He told them that he would call the police if the boys did not stop harassing the girl. The boys fell silent but did not leave. Adnan knew that they would continue harassing her when he left, so he waited there until the bus came. Eliza stands up against the bullies. Eliza studied in class 6 in a school in London. The school was very strict. However, some students were ill-mannered and would bully others. One day, Eliza found out that these students were bullying one of her classmates. They would take away his books and tear out his homework so that he might be punished by the teachers. Blake was a poor boy and he could not afford to buy new books. Blake was very upset. Eliza advised him to tell the teacher everything, but Blake was too scared. That day, when the school closed, Eliza saw the bullies coming to tease Blake. She boldly went up to them and told them to leave Blake alone, otherwise they would regret it. The bullies laughed at her and teased Blake. Eliza ran to one of the teachers. When the teacher saw the boys misbehaving, he immediately suspended them from the school. Jaffar saves the hospital. Jaffar used to work in a small hospital in Iraq. As the violence in Iraq escalated, the number of injured patients began to increase. At first, it was only the injured civilians who came. But as the violence progressed, some of the rebels began coming in as well. For the doctors, it made no difference. Every patient was treated to the best of their abilities. But the rebels expected special treatment and wanted priority to be given to their wounded men. One day, when the doctor refused to see an injured rebel before other wounded patients, the rebel got angry. He suddenly pulled out a hand grenade and ignited it. saying he would kill everyone in the room. Everyone was scared. Jaffar quickly pulled the grenade out of his hand and threw it into an empty park nearby. Thanks to his quick action, all the patients in the hospital were saved. Kenji rescues his neighbor. Kenji lived in a small town in Japan. His neighbor was an old man who could not walk due to an accident. This had made him bad-tempered and unfriendly. However, Kenji always wished him a good day. One day, Kenji and his friends were playing in the park when they felt the earth rumble. "Earthquake!" they shouted. They could see the buildings around them shaking. People were running out of their houses. Kenji suddenly remembered his neighbor who could not walk. While everyone ran to safety, Kenji ran back into the city. He ran back to his house and saw his neighbor was trying to crawl to safety. Kenji quickly picked him up and pulled him onto his back. Then he ran away to a safer area. They left just in time. As they were moving away, they saw a tree fall on the exact spot the old man had fallen on. Khadijah rescues a group of children. Khadijah was 10 years old girl. She was very brave and courageous. She lived in a small village. One day, when she was returning from school, she heard the voices of some children crying. These voices were coming from behind some bushes. She looked for the children in the bushes. She found a group of 7 children ranging in the ages from 7 to 11. They had been separated from their parents by some men. These men were taking them to the city to make them work in factories. The children were very scared. Khadijah quickly decided to help these children. While the men were having their food, she took the children to her farm and hid them behind some piles of straw. When the men came looking for the children, she feigned ignorance, even in the face of dire threats. She managed to save the children from a life of servitude. Francisco saves a train full of people. Francisco's father was a train driver. He would often let Francisco ride with him, which he enjoyed very much. One day, Francisco and his father were singing songs together in the engine compartment when suddenly his father fell down. Francisco did not know it, but his father had suffered a heart attack. The train was a few kilometers away from the nearest station. There were many other trains running on these tracks. Francisco tried to retrieve his father. But when all his efforts failed, he realized he was responsible for driving the train now. If they stood in one place, they could be hit by any other train passing by. Francisco had seen his father drive the train on this route many times, but he still felt scared to do it by himself. However, he knew there was no other option. He guided the train on the twisted path until they reached the nearest station. Daphros saves her siblings. Daphros lived in Rwanda with a family. She was the eldest of their siblings. One day, while their parents were away at work, a man knocked at their door. When Daphros opened the door, he barged in and told her to hide him. The man had a knife in his hand, and there were blood marks all over his clothes. Daphros was very frightened. The man told her that he would attack her if she screamed. Daphros' siblings were playing in the next room. She knew that they would be in great danger if she did not do what the stranger said. So she took him into the kitchen, where he hid behind some curtains. She did not let her siblings know there was a stranger hiding in the house. She did not want them to panic. She calmly suggested they should play outside. Once outside, she ran to the neighbor's house and called the police. Soon, the stranger was arrested. Neil prevents an accident. Neil was a young professor of sociology in a leading college in America. One day, he was driving to his college when he noticed a car in the next lane moving erratically. Suddenly, the car swerved over and hit the barrier on the side of the road. But the driver did not stop. The car was dragging along and sparks were flying from its body. Neil felt very worried. He pulled over beside the car. He saw that the driver was lying sprawled over the steering wheel. Neil knew the car had to be stopped before other people got hurt. He pulled his car in front of the other car and applied the brakes. As the other car crashed into his, it finally stopped. Neil rushed to pull out the driver, who was suffering from a stroke. Thanks to Neil's courageous act, his life was saved. Elena saves a girl from being drowned. Elena lived in Russia. She was a student of art history. One day, she saw two girls skipping in front of her. As she crossed the bridge, they stopped to look at the view. By mistake, one of the girls dropped her doll. She peered over the bridge to see where her doll fell, but lost her balance and fell into the river. Elena took off her shoes and coat and jumped into the river to save the girl. The water was very cold. The girl's clothes were soaking wet and kept on dragging her down. However, Elena managed to pull her to safety. However, it was so cold that the girl's teeth were clattering. Elena could see that the girl had started turning blue. If she did not reach a hospital soon, she would die of cold. Elena wrapped the girl in a coat and rushed her to a hospital. Laila leads the revolution. Laila lived in Turkey. She was a college student who liked to go out with her friends. During that time, the government in Turkey was very unpopular and had taken many measures against people's wishes. People often criticized the government, but no one acted up on this criticism. One day, the government announced that they would be demolishing a park to make way for a shopping complex. This park was very old and nearly everyone had spent time playing there as a child. Laila decided that it was time to move beyond words. She told her friends that they should go to the park and protest. Her friends felt that would not have any impact as they were too few in number. They contacted more people, and on the day of protest, there were more than 5,000 people in the park. The government had to change its decision. Jamila saves lives from a flood. Jamila lived in Bangladesh. Floods were an annual affair, and most people were prepared to handle them. During the rainy season, they would move to safer areas and return to the low-lying lands after the rains. One day, it began to rain heavily in winter. Everyone stayed inside his house. They thought the rain would finish in a few hours. Jamila went out to check on her pet calf. When she was returning, she saw the river was overflowing on the upper banks. In a few minutes, the whole village would be flooded. There wasn't enough time to inform everyone. She grabbed a tin drum her father kept to store fodder. She began to beat it loudly with a stick. People came out to scold her for the noise she was making. She immediately warned them about the overflowing river. Everyone ran and saved his life. Hassan saves his classmates. Hassan and his classmates had gone for an excursion. They saw an empty riverbed with beautiful stones in it. They got out to spend some time in the riverbed. While they were strolling around, they heard a high-pitched whistle. No one paid attention to it. Suddenly, they saw water swirling down the riverbed. The water was coming with great force. All the students ran to the edge of the river to escape the water. Hassan was climbing up the bank when he saw that many of his friends were engulfed by the water. Hassan was a good swimmer. He turned back to help his friends. He rescued 2 boys, but by the time he turned to rescue a 3rd friend, the water was too powerful for him. He saw an overhanging tree ahead. He climbed on it and grabbed his friend before he was swept away. Farid saves many lives. Farid lived in a small village in Uttar Pradesh. Every year, a fair was organized during Diwali. People came from nearby villages. While in the fair, Farid was passing by the enclosure for the bulls. He noticed that there was a lot of noise. He did not pay much attention. A short while later, he saw a group of men running from the enclosure. One of the bulls had escaped. The noise was enraging it, and by now the bull was acting like a crazy animal. Farid knew that many people would be injured if it entered the main area of the fair. He quickly grabbed a piece of red cloth and ran towards the bull, waving the cloth in its face. He knew this would further enrage the bull, and it would try to attack him. As the bull turned towards him in anger, Farid ran away from the fair. saving many innocents' lives. Harish goes to school. Harish was the son of a lowly village potter. He wanted to go to school, but he was afraid that the other students would not let him enter. He would often stand outside the school compound and try to hear what was being taught. One day, he heard the teacher say that every child in India has the right to education. Harish decided to claim his right. The next day, he went to school. The other boys told him he could not enter because he was a potter's son. "That does not matter," replied Harish. "Everyone has a right to study in our country." The boys were very angry at his answer and beat him up badly, but Harish did not leave the school. He was determined to study. Every day, the boys would beat him, but he did not leave. Finally, they accepted him as their classmate. The coastal area of Andhra Pradesh. One day, the sea was full of high waves. Soon, there was an announcement saying that a hurricane would be hitting their village. When Santosh heard this, he rushed to bring his boats to a safer area before leaving the village. By the time he had dragged his boats to safety, the sky was overcast. Santosh was rushing home when he heard a voice calling for help. He looked around but could see no one. The shouting continued. Santosh was near a cliff. When he looked over the side, he saw a young boy hanging onto a tree growing from the cliff wall. He had been blown over by the strong winds. Risking his own life, Santosh held out his hand to the boy and helped him climb up the cliff wall. He then carried the boy on his back to the nearest shelter. Freddies saves the animals from a flood. Freddies was 11 years old. She lived in a village in Kashmir and loved to play with animals. She had decided to become a veterinary doctor when she grew up. One day, there was a heavy rainfall and River Jhelum began overflowing. No one was prepared for the sudden flood. People scrambled to save their lives and rescue their belongings. Freddies suddenly realized that no one was thinking about the animals. The cows were still inside the barns, the dogs were tied to the posts, and the horses were tied to their carts. They would be killed in the flood. Freddies ran out and tried to save the animals. She untied all the animals. She opened the doors so that the animals might escape to a safer ground. She took the smaller animals like hens, etc., to the roof of her house where they would be safe. Punky helps arrest terrorists. Punky lived in the northeastern part of India. She was a young and courageous girl. Every day, she would go out in the forest and collect leaves and plants to feed her baby goat. One day, when she was climbing the mountains, she saw 3 men hiding behind a tree. She was very curious about them and hid behind a huge rock to find out more. She realized that the men were not Indians. They were terrorists who were plotting something dangerous. Punky silently moved away. Once she was at a distance, she ran back to the city. She did not stop until she reached the police station. She told them what she had seen and guided the policemen back to the spot where the terrorists were hiding. Thanks to Punky, the terrorists were apprehended before they could put their plan into action. Natalie overpowers hijacker. Natalie loved to travel. She used to work as an air hostess, and this gave her an opportunity to see many countries. On one of her flights, she noticed a man behaving strangely. Before she could do anything, the man suddenly jumped up and said, "Nobody should move. I am hijacking the plane." All the passengers were scared, and some people began to scream out of fear. This enraged the hijacker. Natalie and the crew requested the hijacker to let them move in the aisle and take care of the passengers. They quickly tried to calm down the passengers. Natalie noticed that the hijacker was not very confident. In a short while, he had become very nervous and tense. She waited until he was wiping the perspiration off his face. Suddenly, she lunged for his gun. Once she had his gun, the other crew members managed to restrain him. Rishi puts his duty above everyone. Rishi lived in Leh in Ladakh. He was the manager of a hotel. He loved his work and took great pride in ensuring that the tourists were satisfied. One day, he noticed that there were thick black clouds covering the sky. Rishi advised the tourists not to go outside very far, since it looked as if it would rain heavily. However, no one was prepared for the sudden cloudburst. It seemed as if someone had opened a tap from heaven. Rishi's wife and children were alone at home. He was very worried about them and wanted to check on them. However, he realized that he was more needed at the hotel. Soon, it flooded all over. The tourists had started to panic. Rishi stayed at the hotel and allayed their fears. It was only when the water started receding that he left the hotel to visit his wife and children. He signed up with international organizations to work for free. He liked to help people to the best of his abilities. On one of these trips, Dimitri was sent to a health camp in Central Africa. Dimitri found many people had high fever in the villages adjoining the camp. There was no lab available for him to identify the disease conclusively. But he could see that it was a contagious disease. Many patients were dying of high fever. Those who survived were weak and delirious. In a few days, the other doctors began leaving one by one. They did not want to put their lives at risk. However, Dmitri stayed on. He knew it was very dangerous and he could fall ill as well. But he felt that as a doctor, it was his duty to cure his patients, even if that meant risking his life. Abbas protects everyone. Abbas was 35 years old man. One day, he was at the bank when a group of robbers rushed in, brandishing their guns. They asked the bank manager to give them all the cash. All the customers of the bank were forced into the locker room while the robbers collected as much cash as possible. The customers in the locker room were beginning to panic. They pleaded with the robbers to let them go. This angered the robbers. Abbas stepped in. He told the robbers that he would ensure that no one spoke up if they did not harm anyone. Abbas calmed down the panicking customers. He allayed their fears. He also talked with the robbers to soothe them down. He was afraid that they might shoot someone in the heat of the moment. Even though he was scared yet, Abbas saved the hostages from being killed. Alfonso saves the passengers. It was a beautiful day in Cuba. Alfonso and his friends decided to go for a boat ride. When their turn came, Alfonso saw that the boat was already filled with passengers. "Let us wait for the next one," he told us. "Do not worry. It is safe. Please get on," said the boatman. His friends also did not want to wait. So Alfonso and his friends boarded the boat. When they reached the middle of the lake, there was a pleasant breeze. Everyone enjoyed it. Suddenly, the wind turned stronger. The boatman turned the boat back to the shore, but the boat was moving very slowly because it was overpacked. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind overturned the boat. Many people began to be drowned. Alfonso pulled some passengers back towards the boat, where they could hold on to the lifesavers. He dived into the water and rescued many others. Zain prevents a robbery. Zain was a goat herd. He used to spend his day with his goats in the mountains. One day, when he was returning in the evening, he noticed that 2 goats were missing. He brought the rest of the herd to their enclosure and climbed back up to look for the missing goats. While he was wandering in the mountains, he heard a goat bleating. One of the goats had fallen into a ditch. Its companion was standing nearby and bleating. Zain took out the goat. Then he noticed that there were 3 men hiding behind some bushes. Their attention was on the house higher up. This house belonged to the richest man in the village. His daughter was about to get married. Zain realized that the men were planning to rob the house. He quickly rushed down the mountains and informed the police. The robbers were caught immediately. Eva Fights for Peace. Eva was born and brought up in a conflict-ridden area of Colombia. She had seen many people die in petty fights, and each fight left someone thirsting for revenge. As she grew older, she realized that the only way to stop this cycle of violence was to stop the violence altogether. Eva decided that she would work to bring peace back to her town. Whenever she heard that two people were fighting, she would rush to stop them. Many people got angry with her and told her not to interfere in their personal matters. Others made fun of her. But no matter what happened, Eva kept on preventing fights. Slowly, people began to listen to her. Most people still did not agree with her, but they came to respect her. As time passed, there were not fights at all. The place was now peaceful with no violence. Juan saves the environment. Juan lived in Brazil. His house was outside the city and close to the rainforest. His father worked as a health officer for the tribes, who still lived inside the rainforest. One day, an old tribal man came to visit Juan's father. He was very angry about something and was complaining. Juan asked his father what the matter was. His father told him that the old man's tribe was being forced to leave their campsite because a company was setting up their wood factory on that spot. Juan was horrified to think what effect that would have on the environment. He and his friends decided to fight for the trees. They filed many complaints and publicized the whole issue. They went to live in the forest and prevented the factory from being set up by hugging the trees and refusing to leave. Ultimately, the factory was shifted somewhere else. Zola saves her baby brother. Zola lived in a village in Zimbabwe. She loved to play with her baby brother. She would often take him outside their hut and play with him. One day, the two of them were playing. Her brother was feeling hungry, so she went in to get some food for him. When she came out, she was shocked to see a lion near their hut. It was very close to where her brother was playing. Zola did not know what to do. She was afraid that the lion might attack her brother if she made any sudden noise. Suddenly, she saw the tiger moving closer to her brother. Zola threw caution to the wind and ran out, shouting at the top of her voice. The lion turned towards her with a roar. Zola threw the hot partridge in her hands on the lion's face and ran to save her brother. Zulfikar helps a stranger. Zulfikar was at a restaurant one day having lunch with his friends. Suddenly, one of the men on the table behind him began to gag. Something was stuck in his throat, but he was unable to dislodge it. He started choking. His friends tried rubbing his back, but nothing worked. By now, he was having difficulty in breathing. No one knew what to do. Zulfikar rushed forward to help. "Are you a doctor?" asked the man's companions. Zulfikar knew there was no time for all those questions. He pushed them aside and went to help the choking man. He grabbed him from behind and pushed a fist into his chest. Other people thought he was hurting the man and tried to push aside Zulfikar, but he did not stop. He repeated his actions until suddenly the man spat out some food and started breathing normally. Nancy Saves a Kitten. Nancy was only 6 years old. She had a pet cat named Bluebell and a kitten named Snowdrop. Snowdrop was very naughty and would often create problems for herself. One day, Nancy heard Snowdrop mewing in the garden. When Nancy went out to find Snowdrop, she saw that she had climbed up a tall tree. Now she was too scared to come down. Nancy was alone at home. She knew she should wait for an adult to help, but she could see that Snowdrop was afraid. Nancy was also afraid of heights, but she felt bad for Snowdrop. She took a deep breath and started climbing up the tree. She felt scared, but she knew that she had to do this for Snowdrop. Nancy was able to bring Snowdrop down. She felt very brave because she had not given in to her fear of heights. She was very happy. Erin saves her sister. One day, Erin and her sister Amy were making too much noise while playing inside the house. So their mother asked them to go out and play in the garden. Both the girls played for some time, and then they began to feel tired. The weather was very pleasant, so they decided to stay outside on the lawn. They didn't realize when they fell asleep. Erin woke up after some time and turned towards Amy. She was shocked to see that there was a snake sleeping right next to her arm. Erin was very afraid. If she made any noise, the snake would attack her. On the other hand, if she did not warn Amy, she could hurt the snake by simply moving her arm. Erin saw that Amy was in a deep sleep. She quietly got up and slowly moved behind the snake. Then, like lightning, she grabbed the snake and threw it away. Benito helps the prisoners. Benito was a young man who wanted to work for the poor. He wanted to help those who had no one. He joined many organizations, but never got a feeling of satisfaction. He never felt as if he made a difference. If not him, someone else would help. Then one day, he found out that a security prison was looking for a counselor. Many people had turned down this job because it meant staying in the prison full time and helping the prisoners. Benito decided to take up this challenge. When he went to the prison, he was very scared by some of the prisoners. They looked cruel. Benito felt that his help would make a real difference to these people. if he changed their way of life, they could be better people. He faced many taunts from the prisoners. A few even attacked him, but Benito tried to reform them. Darius accepts his guilt. Darius was a brash young man. One day, he was speeding down the highway when another car tried to overtake him. Darius swore to prevent him from overtaking. There was an accident and the second car spun out of control. It crashed into the barrier. Many people pulled over to help. No one noticed Darius, who had parked ahead. The next day, Darius read in the newspaper about the accident. He read that the driver was badly hurt. Darius felt very guilty. He knew that he was to blame, but he did not have the courage to accept his mistake. The accident had happened in the night, and the driver only remembered the car he crashed into. Somebody driving a similar car had been arrested. Darius knew he had to step forward to save an innocent man. It was not easy, but somehow he found the courage to do the right thing. Fyodor speaks the truth. Fyodor was a biochemist. He worked in the research division of a multinational company. His job was to conduct quality checks on new products that the company prepared. A few months into his job, Fyodor realized that the company was not following the right procedures. He also found that many products did not meet the safety standards. He immediately informed his supervisors. However, he saw that no charges were made. The firm continued its old style of working. Fyodor did not know what to do. One day, he saw the products of his firm in the market. Fyodor was shocked, for he knew that the products had not met all the safety standards. Fyodor realized that his complaint had not been taken seriously. He immediately contacted the CEO, Chief Executive Officer, directly and told him all the details. The CEO thanked him and ordered the products to be immediately withdrawn. The supervisors were also suspended. Aaron helps a road accident victim. Aaron was a responsible young man. One day, he was out on some official work when he saw that the road was blocked. He thought it was a traffic jam and patiently waited. When the traffic started moving, he saw that there had been an accident. A young lady had been thrown off her two-wheeler. She lay unconscious on one side of the road. People passing by slowed down, but no one stopped to help. They were afraid of getting involved in a medical legal case. Aaron also continued on his way because he did not want to be late for his work. But then he felt ashamed of himself and pulled over. He took the young lady to the hospital. The doctors told him that he had come just in time. A little more late, the lady would have been dead. Everyone praised Aaron for his good work. Nicole conquers the mountain. Nicole lived in a small village in the shadows of the Andes. It was her desire to climb to the top of the mountain near her home. But Nicole came from a very poor family. She knew that she would never be able to get money or time for a mountain climbing trip. Everyone told her she would never be able to climb up the mountain. However, Nicole never gave up on her wish. Many years went by, and one day Nicole got the chance to accompany a scientific expedition to the mountain top as an assistant. She was very happy. When the ascent started, Nicole was very excited, but each day proved tougher than the previous. One day, she stumbled and sprained her ankle, but she did not give up. She knew there was work to be done. She bravely continued climbing up the mountain until she reached the peak. Danilo scares a bear. Danilo was a young boy. His parents were animal specialists. They would often travel to different countries to study the animals there. Sometimes Danilo used to accompany them. One day, his parents were asked to study about the life of grizzly bears. Danilo went with them on the trip. They spent 2 weeks in the jungle and observed the grizzly bears. One day, Danilo was feeling tired, so his parents left him in the camp. While Danilo was resting, he heard some screams. He went out and saw that a grizzly bear was attacking a girl. The girl did not know what to do. Danilo had been observing the bears for quite a few days, and he knew how to scare away a grizzly bear. He ran in front of the bear and raised his arms high. He started shouting loudly. His behavior scared away the bear and saved the girl. Viola is very brave. Viola loved to spend time with her grandmother. One day, her grandmother took her to a farm. Both of them had a lot of fun. On the way back, the tire burst and their car crashed into a pole. Viola hurt her arm badly. She did not know it, but it was actually a fracture. She was going to tell her grandmother when she realized that the accident had given her grandmother a concussion. Viola knew that her grandmother should not be moved. She made her comfortable in the back seat and set out for help. But now it was dark. Viola had to walk for 5 miles on the dark and lonely road before she got help. However, Viola was very brave and knew that her grandmother's life depended on timely medical help. Despite the throbbing pain in her arm, she did not stop until she found help for her grandmother. A Patriotic Speech. Akhilesh was the son of a freedom fighter. He studied in a school in the year 1942. One day, a competition was held to decide the best speaker. The topic was the benefits of British rule. Akhilesh did not agree to this topic. but he wanted to speak on the stage. On the day of the competition, the British governor was invited as judge. Akhilesh gave a speech in which he spoke frankly that he felt there was no benefit from the British rule. The teachers were shocked to hear his speech, and so was the governor. Midway through his speech, he was pulled off the stage. However, Akhilesh did not go quietly. He kept on shouting his speech. Even when the principal threatened him to be silent, he did not stop. Akhilesh was not afraid of anyone or anything, as he knew he was speaking the truth. Ramu attacks the kidnappers. Ramu used to work at the landlord's house. His job was to take care of the landlord's youngest son, Ajay. Ajay was a very active child, and Ramu was always on his toes to take care of him. One day, while playing on the riverside, Ajay ran far ahead of Ramu. Suddenly, a car stopped and a man got down to grab Ajay. He picked up Ajay and threw him in the car. Ramu ran behind them. They were already in the car by the time Ramu reached them. He jumped onto the car and hung on until they slowed down. They wanted to shake him off, but he jumped into the car through the window and started hitting them. He grabbed hold of Ajay and jumped out of the moving car. They hid in a ditch until the kidnappers left in disappointment. Shashi helps nab murderer. Shashi was 10 years old girl. She lived with her parents in a small town in Uttar Pradesh in India. One day, her parents left her at a friend's house for the day. Shashi was playing on the roof when she saw a man come to the neighbor's house. He rang the bell. When someone opened the door, he pulled out a pistol and shot him. Then he looked around to see if anyone had seen him. Shashi quickly hid behind the water tank on the roof. The shooter did not see her. Later on, when the police came and asked if anyone had seen anything, Shashi stepped forward bravely and told them all that she had seen. She described the man to the police. She was not at all afraid that he might harm her. She knew she was doing the right thing. Thanks to Shashi, the shooter was soon apprehended. Nasser Saves Old Man. Nasser was a very lazy boy. He liked to spend his whole time sleeping in the sun. His mother was afraid that he would become a vagabond, and so she would always nag him to do some work. One day, Nasser was in a park to hide from his mother's nagging when he saw a group of teenager boys vandalizing an old man's cart. Nasser was shocked to see that they were teasing the man and were trying to take his hard-earned money. Nasser did not think twice. He rushed to the old man's help. When the teenagers tried to push him aside, he fought back. Nasser was able to hold back the gang long enough for the old man to get the assistance of the police. Even though the teenagers were older than he, Nasser fought against them because he knew they were misbehaving with the old man. Rajesh catches the chain snatchers. Rajesh was a young man. He liked to go for a walk every evening. Normally, he would meet many people, but now people were scared of a gang of criminals. Actually, a gang of chain snatchers was operating in their area. Many women had lost their valuables. Rajesh was walking down the road when he saw a motorcycle slow down near her. She was busy adjusting her child's pram. The rider asked her for some directions. When she started directing them, they suddenly snatched her golden chain and revved up the motorcycle. The snatchers pulled so hard that the lady fell on the road. Rajesh felt very angry, so he ran up to the motorcycle. Just as they were pulling away, he grabbed the person sitting on the back seat. He did it with such force that the motorcycle disbalanced. The chain snatchers fell down and were caught by the people. Mahesh saves the slum. Mahesh was a poor but brave rickshaw puller. He lived in a slum with his wife and children. One day, he was having lunch when there was a loud noise from the neighbor's house. The woman who lived next door came running out, screaming, "Fire!" The gas cylinder in her house had started leaking. Now her house was also started to burn. The fire started when she lit a matchstick to turn the burner on. The kitchen contained leaking gas. She needed help. Mahesh knew that in a few minutes the cylinder would explode and there would be a huge fire. The fire would spread very fast. The whole slum could be destroyed. He ran into his neighbor's house and pulled out the burning cylinder. He dragged it to an abandoned tank nearby and threw it inside. The cylinder exploded with great force. By then, the people had put out the fire in the neighbor's house. Mahesh's arms were burned, but thanks to his bravery, the slum was safe. Aruni brings water to the village. There was an unfortunate village that had no drinking water. The villagers had to walk miles to fetch water. Aruni, the young and courageous girl of this village, decided to find a solution to the water problem. Encouraged by her geography teacher, Aruni asked everyone in the village to collect rainwater, but no one listened to her. She alone used to conserve rainwater in a ditch that she had dug. The water being dirty, no one used this water. The geography teacher told Aruni that she might find water inside if she could dig the ground. Since she had collected water in a small ditch, there might possibly be drinking water underground. Aruni asked the villagers to help her dig, but everyone was cynical. So Aruni started digging the surface alone. Each day she was disappointed, but she continued her search. One day she found water. She happily shared water with the villagers.
Thanks for watching. Do like, share, subscribe to Sahil Book House.